MTC 202293 number 18. Dear Natalie Talley. Natalie Talley. My name is Olivia Spikes, the mayor of Millstown. Olivia Spikes, Millstone. Before you attend the World Championships next month, on behalf of everyone in Millstown, I wish to let you know that we are supporting you all the way. Millstone. As you are the first famous figure skater from Millstown, we are all big fans of yours. Millstown. Our community was so proud of you for winning the national championships last year. Your amazing performance really moved us all. We all believe that you are going to impress the entire nation again. Your hometown supporters will cheer for you whenever you perform on the ice. Good luck. Best wishes, Olivia Spikes. Olivia Spikes. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 19. Daddy. Jenny called, waving a yellow crayon in her little hand. Jenny. Nathan approached her, wondering why she was calling him Nathan. Jenny, his 3-year-old toddler, was drawing a big circle on a piece of paper. Jenny. What are you doing, sweetie? Nathan asked with interest. Nathan. She just kept drawing without reply. He continued watching her, wondering what she was working on. She was drawing something that looked like a face. When she finished it, Jenny shouted, "Look, Daddy!" Jenny. She held her artwork up proudly. Taking a closer look, Nathan recognized that it was his face. Nathan. The face had 2 big eyes and a beard just like his. He loved Jenny's work. Jenny. Filled with joy and happiness, Nathan gave her a big hug. Nathan. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 20. Becoming competent in another culture means looking beyond behavior to see if we can understand the attitudes, beliefs, and values that motivate what we observe. By looking only at the visible aspects of culture, customs, clothing, food, and language, we develop a short-sighted view of intercultural understanding, just the tip of the iceberg, really. If we are to be successful in our business interactions with people who have different values and beliefs about how the world is ordered, then we must go below the surface of what it means to understand culture and attempt to see what Edward Hall calls the hidden dimensions. Edward Hall. Those hidden aspects are the very foundation of culture and are the reason why culture is actually more than meets the eye. We tend not to notice those cultural norms until they violate what we consider to be common sense, good judgment, or the nature of things. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 21. You may feel there is something scary about an algorithm deciding what you might like. Could it mean that, if computers conclude you won't like something, you will never get the chance to see it? Personally, I really enjoy being directed toward new music that I might not have found by myself. I can quickly get stuck in a rut where I put on the same songs over and over. That's why I've always enjoyed the radio. But the algorithms that are now pushing and pulling me through the music library are perfectly suited to finding gems that I'll like. My worry originally about such algorithms was that they might drive everyone into certain parts of the library, leaving others lacking listeners. Would they cause a convergence of tastes? But thanks to the nonlinear and chaotic mathematics usually behind them, this doesn't happen. A small divergence in my likes compared to yours can send us off into different far corners of the library. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 22. Historically, drafters of tax legislation are attentive to questions of economics and history, and less attentive to moral questions. Questions of morality are often pushed to the side in legislative debate, labeled too controversial, too difficult to answer, or, worst of all, irrelevant to the project. But, in fact, the moral questions of taxation are at the very heart of the creation of tax laws. Rather than irrelevant, moral questions are fundamental to the imposition of tax. Tax is the application of a society's theories of distributive justice. Economics can go a long way towards helping a legislature determine whether or not a particular tax law will help achieve a particular goal, but economics cannot, in a vacuum, identify the goal. Creating tax policy requires identifying a moral goal, which is a task that must involve ethics and moral analysis. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 23. Environmental learning occurs when farmers base decisions on observations of payoff information. They may observe their own or neighbors' farms, but it is the empirical results they are using as a guide, not the neighbors themselves. They are looking at farming activities as experiments and assessing such factors as relative advantage, compatibility with existing resources, difficulty of use, and trialability, how well can it be experimented with. But that criterion of trialability turns out to be a real problem. It's true that farmers are always experimenting, but working farms are very flawed laboratories. Farmers cannot set up the controlled conditions of professional test plots in research facilities. Farmers also often confront complex and difficult to observe phenomena that would be hard to manage even if they could run controlled experiments. Moreover, farmers can rarely acquire payoff information on more than a few of the production methods they might use, which makes the criterion of relative advantage hard to measure. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 24. Not only musicians and psychologists, but also committed music enthusiasts and experts often voice the opinion that the beauty of music lies in an expressive deviation from the exactly defined score. Concert performances become interesting and gain in attraction from the fact that they go far beyond the information printed in the score. In his early studies on musical performance, Carl C. Shore discovered that musicians only rarely play two equal notes in exactly the same way. Carl C. Shore. Within the same metric structure, there is a wide potential of variations in tempo, volume, tonal quality, and intonation. Such variation is based on the composition but diverges from it individually. We generally call this expressivity. This explains why we do not lose interest when we hear different artists perform the same piece of music. It also explains why it is worthwhile for following generations to repeat the same repertoire. New, inspiring interpretations help us to expand our understanding, which serves to enrich and animate the music scene. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 25. The graph above shows the top 4 European countries with the most renewable energy generation capacity in 2011 and in 2020. 2011-2024. Each of the 4 countries in the graph had a higher capacity to generate renewable energy in 2020 than its respective capacity in 2011. 4-2020-2011. Germany's capacity to generate renewable energy in 2011 reached more than 50.0 gigawatts, which was also the case in 2020. 2011 50.0, 2020. Among the countries above, Spain ranked in second place in terms of renewable energy generation capacity in 2011 and remained in second place in 2020. 2012, 2022. The renewable energy generation capacity of Italy in 2020 was lower than that of Spain in the same year. 2020. The renewable energy generation capacity of France was higher than that of Italy in 2020. 2020. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 26. Leon Festinger was an American social psychologist. Leon Festinger. He was born in New York City in 1919 to a Russian immigrant family. 1919. As a graduate student at the University of Iowa, Festinger was influenced by Kurt Lewin, a leading social psychologist. Festinger Kurt Lewin. After graduating from there, he became a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1945. 1945. He later moved to Stanford University, where he continued his work in social psychology. His theory of social comparison earned him a good reputation. Festinger actively participated in international scholarly cooperation. Festinger. In the late 1970s, he turned his interest to the field of history. 1970. He was one of the most cited psychologists of the 20th century. 20. Festinger's theories still play an important role in psychology today. Festinger. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 29. Recognizing ethical issues is the most important step in understanding business ethics. An ethical issue is an identifiable problem, situation, or opportunity that requires a person to choose from among several actions that may be evaluated as right or wrong, ethical or unethical. Learning how to choose from alternatives and make a decision requires not only good personal values, but also knowledge competence in the business area of concern. Employees also need to know when to rely on their organization's policies and codes of ethics or have discussions with coworkers or managers on appropriate conduct. Ethical decision-making is not always easy because there are always gray areas that create dilemmas, no matter how decisions are made. For instance, should an employee report on a coworker engaging in time theft? Should a salesperson leave out facts about a product's poor safety record in his presentation to a customer? Such questions require the decision-maker to evaluate the ethics of his or her choice and decide whether to ask for guidance. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 30. Although the wonders of modern technology have provided people with opportunities beyond the wildest dreams of our ancestors, the good, as usual, is weakened by a downside. One of those downsides is that anyone who so chooses can pick up the virtual megaphone that is the internet and put in their 2 cents on any of an infinite number of topics, regardless of their qualifications. After all, on the internet, there are no regulations preventing a kindergarten teacher from offering medical advice or a physician from suggesting ways to safely make structural changes to your home. As a result, misinformation gets disseminated as information, and it is not always easy to differentiate the two. This can be particularly frustrating for scientists, who spend their lives learning how to understand the intricacies of the world around them, only to have their work summarily challenged by people whose experience with the topic can be measured in minutes. This frustration is then amplified by the fact that, to the general public, both the scientist and the challenger are awarded equal credibility. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 31. More than just having territories, animals also partition them. And this insight turned out to be particularly useful for zoo husbandry. An animal's territory has an internal arrangement that Heini Heidegger compared to the inside of a person's house. Heini Heidegger. Most of us assign separate functions to separate rooms, but even if you look at a one-room house you will find the same internal specialization. In a cabin or a mud hut, or even a Mesolithic cave from 30,000 years ago, this part is for cooking, that part is for sleeping, this part is for making tools and weaving, that part is for waste. 3. We keep a neat functional organization. To a varying extent, other animals do the same. A part of an animal's territory is for eating, a part for sleeping, a part for swimming or wallowing, a part may be set aside for waste, depending on the species of animal. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 32. Fans feel for feeling's own sake. They make meanings beyond what seems to be on offer. They build identities and experiences, and make artistic creations of their own to share with others. A person can be an individual fan, feeling an idealized connection with a star, strong feelings of memory and nostalgia, and engaging in activities like collecting to develop a sense of self. But, more often, individual experiences are embedded in social contexts where other people with shared attachments socialize around the object of their affections. Much of the pleasure of fandom comes from being connected to other fans. In their diaries, Bostonians of the 1800s described being part of the crowds at concerts as part of the pleasure of attendance. 1800. A compelling argument can be made that what fans love is less the object of their fandom than the attachments to, and differentiations from, one another that those affections afford. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 33. There was nothing modern about the idea of men making women's clothes. We saw them doing it for centuries in the past. In the old days, however, the client was always primary and her tailor was an obscure craftsman, perhaps talented but perhaps not. She had her own ideas like any patron, there were no fashion plates, and the tailor was simply at her service, perhaps with helpful suggestions about what others were wearing. Beginning in the late 19th century, with the hugely successful rise of the artistic male couturier, it was the designer who became celebrated, and the client elevated by his inspired attention. 19. In a climate of admiration for male artists and their female creations, the dress designer first flourished as the same sort of creator. Instead of the old rule that dressmaking is a craft, a modern connection between dress design and art was invented that had not been there before. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 34. In trying to explain how different disciplines attempt to understand autobiographical memory, the literary critic Daniel Albright said, "Psychology is a garden, literature is a wilderness." Daniel Albright. He meant, I believe, that psychology seeks to make patterns, find regularity, and ultimately impose order on human experience and behavior. Writers, by contrast, dive into the unruly, untamed depths of human experiences. What he said about understanding memory can be extended to our questions about young children's minds. If we psychologists are too bent on identifying the orderly pattern, the regularities of children's minds, we may miss an essential and pervasive characteristic of our topic, the child's more unruly and imaginative ways of talking and thinking. It is not only the developed writer or literary scholar who seems drawn toward a somewhat wild and idiosyncratic way of thinking, young children are as well. The psychologist interested in young children may have to venture a little more often into the wilderness in order to get a good picture of how children think. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 35. Because plants tend to recover from disasters more quickly than animals, they are essential to the revitalization of damaged environments. Why do plants have this preferential ability to recover from disaster? It is largely because, unlike animals, they can generate new organs and tissues throughout their life cycle. This ability is due to the activity of plant meristems, regions of undifferentiated tissue in roots and shoots that can, in response to specific cues, differentiate into new tissues and organs. If meristems are not damaged during disasters, plants can recover and ultimately transform the destroyed or barren environment. You can see this phenomenon on a smaller scale when a tree struck by lightning forms new branches that grow from the old scar. In addition to regeneration or rooting of plants, disturbed areas can also recover through reseeding. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 36. When two natural bodies of water stand at different levels, building a canal between them presents a complicated engineering problem. To make up for the difference in level, engineers build one or more water steps, called locks, that carry ships or boats up or down between the two levels. A lock is an artificial water basin. It has a long rectangular shape with concrete walls and a pair of gates at each end. When a vessel is going upstream, the upper gates stay closed as the ship enters the lock at the lower water level. The downstream gates are then closed and more water is pumped into the basin. The rising water lifts the vessel to the level of the upper body of water. Then the upper gates open and the ship passes through. For downstream passage, the process works the opposite way. The ship enters the lock from the upper level, and water is pumped from the lock until the ship is in line with the lower level. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 37. Culture operates in ways we can consciously consider and discuss, but also in ways of which we are far less cognizant. When we have to offer an account of our actions, we consciously understand which excuses might prove acceptable, given the particular circumstances we find ourselves in. In such situations, we use cultural ideas as we would use a particular tool. We select the cultural notion as we would select a screwdriver. Certain jobs call for a Phillips head while others require an Allen wrench. Whichever idea we insert into the conversation to justify our actions, the point is that our motives are discursively available to us. They are not hidden. In some cases, however, we are far less aware of why we believe a certain claim to be true, or how we are to explain why certain social realities exist. Ideas about the social world become part of our worldview without our necessarily being aware of the source of the particular idea or that we even hold the idea at all. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 38. In everyday life, we tend to see any collection of people as a group. However, social psychologists use this term more precisely. In particular, they define a group as two or more people who interact with, and exert mutual influences on, each other. It is this sense of mutual interaction or interdependence for a common purpose which distinguishes the members of a group from a mere aggregation of individuals. For example, as Kenneth Hodge observed, a collection of people who happen to go for a swim after work on the same day each week does not, strictly speaking, constitute a group because these swimmers do not interact with each other in a structured manner. Kenneth Hodge. By contrast, a squad of young competitive swimmers who train every morning before going to school is a group because they not only share a common objective, training for competition, but also interact with each other in formal ways, e.g., by warming up together beforehand. It is this sense of people coming together to achieve a common objective that defines a team. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 39. Each new wave of technology is intended to enhance user convenience, as well as improve security, but sometimes these do not necessarily go hand in hand. For example, the transition from magnetic stripe to embedded chip slightly slowed down transactions, sometimes frustrating customers in a hurry. Make a service too burdensome, and the potential customer will go elsewhere. This obstacle applies at several levels. Passwords, double key identification, and biometrics such as fingerprint, iris, and voice recognition are all ways of keeping the account details hidden from potential fraudsters, of keeping your data dark. But they all inevitably add a burden to the use of the account. On top of the hurdles introduced in accessing his or her money, if a suspected fraud is detected, the account holder has to deal with the phone call asking if he or she made the suspicious transactions. This is all useful at some level indeed. It can be reassuring knowing that your bank is keeping alert to protect you, but it becomes tiresome if too many such calls are received. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC 202293 number 40. A striving to demonstrate individual personality through designs should not be surprising. Most designers are educated to work as individuals, and design literature contains countless references to the designer. Personal flair is without doubt an absolute necessity in some product categories, particularly relatively small objects, with a low degree of technological complexity, such as furniture, lighting, small appliances, and housewares. In larger-scale projects, however, even where a strong personality exercises powerful influence, the fact that substantial numbers of designers are employed in implementing a concept can easily be overlooked. The emphasis on individuality is therefore problematic rather than actually designing. Many successful designer personalities function more as creative managers. A distinction needs to be made between designers working truly alone and those working in a group. In the latter case, management organization and processes can be equally as relevant as designers' creativity. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 4142. Climate change experts and environmental humanists alike agree that the climate crisis is, at its core, a crisis of the imagination, and much of the popular imagination is shaped by fiction. In his 2016 book The Great Derangement, anthropologist and novelist Amitav Ghosh takes on this relationship between imagination and environmental management, arguing that humans have failed to respond to climate change at least in part because fiction fails to believably represent it. Amitav Ghosh 2016 The Great Derangement. Ghosh explains that climate change is largely absent from contemporary fiction because the cyclones, floods, and other catastrophes it brings to mind simply seem too improbable to belong in stories about everyday life. Ghosh. But climate change does not only reveal itself as a series of extraordinary events. In fact, as environmentalists and eco-critics from Rachel Carson to Rob Nixon have pointed out, environmental change can be imperceptible. It proceeds gradually, only occasionally producing explosive and spectacular events. Rachel Carson, Rob Nixon. Most climate change impacts cannot be observed day to day, but they become visible when we are confronted with their accumulated impacts. Climate change evades our imagination because it poses significant representational challenges. It cannot be observed in human time, which is why documentary filmmaker Jeff Orlowski, who tracks climate change effects on glaciers and coral reefs, uses before and after photographs taken several months apart in the same place to highlight changes that occurred gradually. Jeff Orlowski. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. 202293 number 4345. Walking out of Charing Cross Station in London, Amelia and her travelling companion, Layla, already felt their hearts pounding. Charing Cross, Amelia, Layla. It was the second day of their European summer trip. They were about to visit one of the world's most famous art galleries. The two of them started hurrying with excitement. Suddenly, Amelia shouted, "Look! There it is! We're finally at the National Gallery!" Amelia. Layla laughed and responded, "Your dreams finally come true." Layla. Upon entering the National Gallery, Amelia knew exactly where to go first. Amelia. She grabbed Layla's hand and dragged her hurriedly to find Van Gogh's Sunflowers. Van Gogh's Sunflowers, Layla. It was Amelia's favorite painting and had inspired her to become a painter. Amelia. Amelia loved his use of bright colors and light. Amelia. She couldn't wait to finally see his masterpiece in person. It'll be amazing to see how he communicated the feelings of isolation and loneliness in his work, she said eagerly. However, after searching all the exhibition rooms, Amelia and Layla couldn't find Van Gogh's masterpiece anywhere. Amelia, Layla, Van Gogh. That's weird. Van Gogh's Sunflowers should be here. Where is it? Van Gogh's Sunflowers. Amelia looked upset, but Layla kept calm and said, "Maybe you've missed a notice about it. Check the National Gallery app." Amelia, Layla. Amelia checked it quickly. Amelia. Then, she sighed, "Sunflowers isn't here. It's been lent to a different gallery for a special exhibition. I can't believe I didn't check. Sunflowers. Don't lose hope yet. Which gallery is the special exhibition at?" Layla asked. Layla. Amelia responded, "Well, his Sunflowers is still in England, but it's at a gallery in Liverpool. That's a long way, isn't it? Emilia, sunflowers. After a quick search on her phone, Layla stated, no. It's only 2 hours to Liverpool by train. The next train leaves in an hour. Why don't we take it? Layla. After considering the idea, Emilia, now relieved, responded, yeah, but you always wanted to see Rembrandt's paintings. Let's do that first, Layla. Then, after lunch, we can catch the next train. Emilia, Rembrandt. Layla. Layla smiled brightly. Layla. MTC. Good job.